In a dystopian fairy tale future where most of the population is starving, what could be more inviting than a candy shop conveniently located on the outskirts of a deserted city? And what's even better, it's all you can eat, for free. Nothing suspicious about that, right? Hi guys, welcome back, or welcome for the first time if you're new here. My name is Miss Mini Life, and today's diorama build is continuing in the fairy tale series that I started 2 videos ago. If you haven't watched those videos, you might want to check those out, but you don't have to have seen them to follow along. Most of this diorama is being built out of cardboard, and a couple of videos ago I started using this and I really love this stuff. This light bulb is a portable LED light bulb that I found at the 99-cent store. It's going to be perfect for lighting the inside of this building. Here I'm just building a box that's going to become the main part of the candy shop. And the candy shop is filling in for the gingerbread house of the witch in the old fairy tale of Hansel and Gretel. For those of you who aren't familiar, it's a story about 2 kids who get left in the woods by their parents to fend for themselves. They stumble upon a gingerbread house owned by a witch who, it turns out, is trying to fatten them up with sweets so she can eat them. They escape in the end, but long story short, fairy tales are crazy. If you've ever heard about anyone talking about leaving breadcrumbs as a trail, that comes from that story. This diorama was inspired by me watching my boyfriend play tons of cyberpunk on the computer. I really loved the aesthetic of the city, and I mostly just wanted an excuse to try and create something in that world. I also knew that I wanted to have there be rain somehow in this diorama. And shout out to North of the Border, who is another YouTuber. He is where I saw this technique first used, and I really was dying to try it out to make rain, so you guys will see later on in the video. The abandoned train tracks were important because I knew that I was going to be stringing invisible thread all over the diorama, and I needed something above the building for me to be able to do that. Here I'm using cardboard to create some supports, and I use some plastic tubes and just cut small pieces to make rivets, and then made everything into the shape of these like I-beams. I wanted to have a lot of signs and advertisements in this diorama, so I created some different ones in Photoshop and then printed them out. And then I created the displays and the holders for them using more of the cereal box cardboard. Then I planned out where I wanted to attach all of the pieces and added a few more details to the building itself, just hot gluing random bits into different places to see if I liked them. If I didn't like them, I tore them off. These lights were a great source of LEDs that I found at the 99-cent store, and I removed the lanterns and the little plastic pieces that held it together and then attached it to the roof. Here's a little clip of me naively thinking that this diorama was somehow almost finished. So now we just have to paint it and do the concrete at the bottom, and we'll be done. Yeah, no. But let's move on. Before I painted everything up, I first gave it a coat of this Krylon spray black primer. This is where I started to fall in love with the top of the train. Once it was sprayed in primer, it looked so much nicer than I was expecting, especially for it to just be made of cardboard. I used foam board for the base, and I cut a hole because that's where I'm gonna stick that light bulb that I showed you at the beginning. And covered it with some drywall spackle. And then I added I was attempting to add fine sand to this, but I didn't realize that this little sock thing I was using had a hole in it and was letting out all of the larger chunks of sand that I didn't want. So it's okay, I just brushed them away after with my paintbrush. And then I painted the ground dark gray and used a sponge to give it some texture. Next, I painted the train tracks using some silver acrylic paint. And then I also used some red mixed in to give it a little bit aged, not really super rusty, but starting to rust look. And I did this a lot, adding a few different layers, and I like how it ended up at the end, but it did take time to build that up. For painting the roof, I wanted to make sure that I had tons of colors because I want this house to still have the look and feel of a gingerbread house. And then the signs that I created for the windows are made of overhead projector slides. They were pretty reasonably priced. You can get them from Amazon, and I'll have some down below in my description box. I'll have links to where you can get it. But these transparencies were really nice for creating the window displays. The next step was to add tons of shingles to the roof. The shingles were the main part of the fairy tale house look that I wanted to bring and cross over with this dystopian future look. And I always forget how long it takes and how much work it is to individually place a bunch of shingles, but I did find a trick that Miscast used in one of his builds. He's also a YouTuber that you guys can go check out, but he made strips of shingles and then just cut along them, and later on that's what I started using to fill in places on the roof. And that worked out a lot better. You can kind of see that here. Just one strip, and then you cut various like pieces, and then you can glue down the strip, and it saves you a ton of time. After I made sure that it looked the way I wanted it to, I decided to add on some candies because the gingerbread house is covered in candy. Originally, I didn't anticipate how many candies I would need, and I was making it more of like a shop look than a house. So I only made a few candies and then placed them on the top, which you'll see in a little bit. But here I am just using gray acrylic paint to paint the entire building, and I use a darker color to paint all of the shingles for the roof. Next, I'm using a dry brush technique where I'm taking some red colors and brown, and actually just a ton of different browns that I had lying around, and dabbing off most of the paint and then kind of smearing it all over the roof shingles. And it really, really, really looks nice when you do this and you have something that can catch all of those edges with paint. So this was one of my favorite parts of painting the piece. Here I am cutting out these tiny candies, and you will see in a moment that there are not nearly enough. This is part of the reason why I almost not put this video out, because around here is where I thought that I would be done with this build, and once I got to this point, it really didn't look anything like I wanted it to. And I was feeling a little bit burnt out because I wanted to work on other things, but I still wanted to finish this one, so I just kind of kept working on it little by little. But as you can see, it's a little bit empty, and it doesn't necessarily look like a gingerbread house yet. Then I started adding some cracks to the cement to make it slightly more realistic. And then started to work on making the rain. So I have invisible thread here. Also, I will link that in the description below. But I ran that through some UV resin, which created all of these little water drop beads along the strand of thread. And then I hardened the UV resin by I hardened the UV resin by holding it up underneath ultraviolet light. I used the same UV resin to create some puddles and swirls on the ground in front of the building. And then I also used that resin to attach the strings both to the ground and to the top of the train tracks. I realized everything needed to look a lot more wet because I wanted it to look like it had just stopped raining or that it was barely raining now. So I added some gloss Modpodge to everything to make it look shinier and like it's a little bit wet. And I didn't like how the water looked at first. I felt like it was a good start, but it needed more work. So I went through and changed up a lot of the strands that I had hanging down. At first I had strands hanging from like every surface, but I went in and took away most of those and then just had a lot of water drops on the bottom ground and a few hanging down. And that worked a lot better. And this is where, well, number one, all ball starts stealing all of my clay, but two, I realized I need more candy. This place did not look at all like a gingerbread house. It didn't look like a candy shop in a magical world. So I went in and started making candy pieces out of some polymer clay, and then I baked them and gave them a coat of acrylic. And then I baked them and gave them a coat of acrylic paint. Once I had my candies, I used the tacky glue to glue them all to the roof. And then I thought it needed something else. So I went ahead and went with an idea that I had in the beginning that I kind of gave up on, but I wanted to do graffiti on the building. And I used this atomizer to spray paint everywhere, but since I waited so long to decide that I wanted to do this, it was really hard to kind of mask off the parts that I didn't want to get sprayed. So I kind of made a mess, and it doesn't help that I knocked over my jar of paint. So if you're gonna do this, be careful and try not to make as big a mess as I did. But in the end, I did like how it looked, and this is the finished product. Let me know what you guys think. Leave a comment down below. I definitely feel like there's some things I want to work on with how I did the water. But in the end, I do love how it turned out, and I'm just happy that I was able to keep working on it until I got to a place where I actually liked it enough to put it out as a video. So I will see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.